Do you know what I'm hearing about A.J. Brown out there on the field? Every single time I talk to somebody that either goes to camp or sees him in person, you know what Gary Cobb said to me? Can't believe the size. He goes, this dude is huge. This dude is imposing. If you've ever stood next to Terrell Owens, he's an imposing dude. I mean, he's carved out of a steak, Terrell Owens. Let me throw this at you here. Where's that year? Here it is. 2004. Terrell Owens had 1,200 yards in 14 games, I believe it was. And 14 touchdowns and 77 catches. Over-under on A.J. Brown exceeding that this year. Now, Donovan McNabb was throwing him the ball here. .1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, 77 catches. God, what's that average? 15? 15-6? 77 catches, 1,200 yards. Had 2 games, too. He probably would have had 1,500 yards that year. What a monster year T.O. had in 04. What a monster year. That's monster numbers. By the way, A.J. Brown versus T.O. Do you know what I'm hearing about A.J. Brown out there on the field? Every single time I talk to somebody that either goes to camp or sees him in person, you know what Gary Cobb said to me? Can't believe the size. He goes, this dude is huge. This dude is imposing. If you've ever stood next to Terrell Owens, he's an imposing dude. I mean, he's carved out of a steak, Terrell Owens. I covered him when I was in San Francisco, and he was with the 49ers. I think T.O., if I'm not mistaken, I want to say he was a 3rd rounder. They liked him a lot, but they thought he played at a small school. I forget. He played at Middle Tennessee or something like that, right? And he was a beast. You saw Terrell Owens walking towards you, you were like, that's a big dude, man. He's running 4.4s, 4.5s. That's a big dude. Flex says, no, it's more weapons on this offense. You got to keep everyone happy. I do think 2 wide receivers between Smith, AJ, and Goddard, 2 of them will have 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. I don't believe, Flex, that there's going to be 2 1,000-yard receivers on this team. Do you know how rare that is with prolific quarterbacks even? How rare that is. I mean, like Duper and Clayton and Marino and what you saw last year in Cincinnati. Very rare to see 2,000-yard wide receivers. I don't think the Cowboys during that Super Bowl run of Michael Irvin, I don't think they ever had 2 1,000-yard wide receivers on that team. Now, it was a predominantly run team, but doesn't this remind you what we're seeing here, guys? Let me ask you something here. Don't you look at this group, this Eagle group, doesn't it remind you a little bit of what the triplets did? Michael Irvin never put up gigantic single-season numbers. But he was effective on 3rd down and jump balls, and they ran the shit out of the ball. They ran the ball and played lights-out defense and got after people with Haley. That's kind of what this is. Now, Aikman was a great 3rd down passer. Okay, he was. Plus, they had Alvin Harper on the other side. That Alvin Harper, Michael Irvin tandem, you had speed over the top and Irvin underneath. And you had Jay Novacek at the tight end position. That was also effective in the slot. They would line him up and slide him over to the slot. North Turner was a hell of a coordinator. And he did a great job at moving that team around. Did a great job of doing it. But what made the Cowboys so good, the Cowboys were so great at doing this. They were fantastic at being constantly in third down. Constantly in third down. Flex says, Yak will play a factor in this and then being able to get spacing. Mr. International, thank you for coming aboard. Westbrook 703, Pinkston 678 in 2004. And Terrell Owens had 1,200 yards. Hey, Marina, I wonder what the catch number was also for Westbrook. Westbrook, if I'm not mistaken, isn't that the year Westbrook also had like 1,300 plus yards rushing? So Westbrook had 700 yards receiving, and he had like 1,300 or 1,400 yards rushing. What a weapon Brian Westbrook was. I say this to you. Him and T.O. are the best tandem in the offensive huddle for one team that the Eagles have had in the last 20 years. You've never had players like that in your huddle except for that 2004 season. Owens with 1,200, and you had a back that was a 1,300-yard back that year and had 700 yards catching. That is a freak show. It's almost unguardable. Almost unguardable. And you played lights out defense. You played lights out defense in the process. Really some great stuff. Really some great stuff. Anthony says Mark Tuney, Nate Newton, Stepnoski, Larry Allen. I'm not sure if Larry Allen was on that first Super Bowl championship team, Anthony. I think he was on the third one. Okay, I don't think he was on the first two. Eric Williams was. But I don't think he was on. I don't think that he was on that first two. I don't believe it. I think he was on the third because Jimmy and those guys had started recruiting him at Humboldt County State or something like that. And I think Switzer had him. Gainwell is no Westbrook, but I see your point. Randy says that Westbrook had 73 catches that year. Jesus criminy, for a running back, that's what I'm talking about. By the way, that Swift kid in Detroit, I think is going to do some stuff like that. Gogan was on that team too, absolutely. Dude, that was a great offensive line. By the way, look at that offensive line. Kind of remind you of an offensive line that's in Philadelphia right now. Brian Westbrook, 95% of the running backs the past 15 years. Mr. International, he was Christian McCaffrey. Like really before Christian McCaffrey. You know what I'm saying? Trent Cole was dominant. I don't remember that. By the way, we're efforting our friend Michael Irvin. He's on his way to the airport. As soon as he gets in the car, he's going to join us, and we'll be able to get a hold of him here in a couple minutes here. Can you imagine if Donovan would have had the weapons that Hurts has? Boy, I'll tell you something. Donovan had Brian Westbrook, Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens had a monster season that year. Brian Westbrook had a monster season. I don't know what you're saying, man. Plus, the tight end was pretty good on that football team, too. Donovan McNabb had some pretty good weapons on that football team, and they had a pretty good offensive line. I don't know, man. That 04 offense, you could make a comparison to what we're seeing here with this offense here this year. Now, this offense has to go out and produce. Trey Thomas and John Runyon were on that offensive line in Philadelphia in 04 also. That's a good group, man. That's a damn good group. Plus, you had Andy Reid calling plays. You had a lot. I mean, now, look, you have maybe a better group of wideouts here, but I'd rather have the 04 group. I'd rather have the 04. I'd rather have a guy who has 73 catches out of the backfield, running for 1,400 yards and 700 yards catching, and a wide receiver with, 14 touchdowns. You're talking about a guy here who was T.O. had an incredible 04 season. Incredible 04 season. Pete says that 04 team was stacked, Sills. I agree. I think they were stacked both offense and defensively. Anthony goes that Brian Westbrook was a quadruple threat. By the way, Sweat and now his development into potentially being a third down defensive player or a 3-down defensive lineman is so enormous. It's so enormous. Let me bring something else over that I heard Barrett Brooks making a comment on with Steichen, the offensive coordinator. I think he's more of a candidate to be a head football coach than Jonathan Allen is. Or, excuse me, Jonathan Allen, defensive lineman for the Washington Commanders, than Jonathan Gannon. I think he's more. He showed me more. When they gave him the offense and they gave him the ability to change the offense midstream because what they were doing wasn't working, showed me creativity. Steichen actually showed me now, and this is why they probably gave him the title of offensive coordinator, is because last year, guess what he did? He actually showed growth. He developed the offense, even with the limitations on it. Something Gannon didn't do last year. Gannon wasn't making that defense better. What helped the defense in the second half of the season? They played lesser teams. But what happened with the offense was, hey, and nothing to take away from Nick Sirianni here, but Sirianni was like, okay, well, we need something different here. So he gives it to Steichen, and Steichen goes like this. Well, let's just run the ball. Let's go to the strength of the team. And the ability to do that is so important. How many times do you see coaches today, any year, always try to jam their system down a team's throat and it just doesn't work? Hey, Chip Kelly's a great example of that. Chip Kelly wanted to run 87 to 95 plays a game, right? Everybody in the NFL know you don't have the roster to do that. It's not that you don't have the players. You don't have the depth, nor do you have the roster. And by the end of the year, you're going to put your team on the MASH unit. That's what ended up being his demise. He didn't conform. And you get rid of guys like Shady. You start moving quality players. Before you know it, the thing you're trying to preserve more is your locker room, and you're losing really great players instead of coaching those players. He needed to coach Shady McCoy. But this group a year ago, hey, I'm going to say this again. I think Steichen is more of an opportunity. And get this, he's not going to get the credit. If Jalen Hurts has a great year this year, Nick Sirianni's going to get the credit for it. Not the offensive coordinator. It's just the way things work out. It's what it is.